attended. I think you would have the highest per capita, community involvement in the Progress Association of any community throughout the Fraser Coast. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Kabi people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We're very fortunate to have with us here today Pastor Brian Briggs from the Lighthouse Christian Church in Boppel to lead us in prayer. Good morning.
Am I on? Yep, I'm on. Hi. I've been around these ridges for years. I grew up in Maryborough, old Maryborough boy. So I know some of the history of way back and all the changes that have come, some good now, not so good over the years, but it's a big job. And especially after the amalgamation, I think that became a bit of a nightmare for quite a few. So we live in a very diverse community groups now. Not quite so much in this area, demographically wise, but there's about 300 different groups. And so running a council, running anything at all, running for election, is a huge task, and I take my hat off to everybody because there's so many different values and ideas being pushed in our community. Some of them, most of them good, some aren't so good. And that's the wisdom that councils and governments need to get through that. James, the brother of John, made it very clear, if any man lacks wisdom, and occasionally we put our hand up with that, let him ask of God who gives liberally. So if you're a Christian, we believe that. And, I wasn't always the smartest guy and still not, make some silly decisions occasionally, and that'll always happen. That's human life, true? So I'm going to pray for wisdom for our council to negotiate all of the different things and make the right choices rather than just pressure point from people who maybe are able to, swear a lot, make a lot of noise, but wisdom to look through all that and make the right decisions for the communities. And I think I would hear behind the scenes everyone going, yes, amen. We need that. So let's pray right now for rain, particularly for our area, a little bit of encouragement on the way, a few spits in the Gympie region as I was on my way here. So let's pray for wisdom and let's pray for rain and pray for our community for unity. True? Father, we thank you today. Pray for the councils across our nation and particularly the Fraser Coast one today as they negotiate various changes in lawmaking and choices they need to make. I pray that you'll give them great wisdom. We also now pray for rain. Our farmers and our communities and our tanks in these areas desperately need more rain. So we ask you now, Lord, to answer that prayer and move on our behalf so that we would see our cows, our animals, and our farms spring back into good life again. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. The next item is apologies and leave of absence, and all councillors are here, sitting a bit closer than normal, so there's no apologies or leave of absence. Disclosure of interests. Are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare? Councillor Taylor?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to draw to the attention of the councillors. I did raise a perceived conflict or potential perceived conflict of interest in relation to item 15.7. It's a confidential item and the applicant hasn't been disclosed in outside of the confidential minutes. I am a member of that part of the applicant. But on seeking advice from the CEO, I was advised that under section 175D, subsection 2, that merely becoming a member of, or being a member of a group does not mean there is a conflict. As such, I am not going to declare a conflict, but because of the changes in legislation, I'm concerned that by not doing so, it can create some confusion. Certainly there's confusion in my mind, so I'm just informing the council body that if they believe that I have a conflict on this matter, that they should bring that to the attention of the meeting. But at this stage, based on section 175 subsection D, I don't believe my membership requires me to declare a conflict.
That's my view as well. You have any requirement? Councillor Lewis?
Yes, Mr Mayor, thanks. I just wanted also to note that my position is the same as Councillor Taylor's, and I take the same position on it.
Councillor Everard.
I too am the same as Councillor Lewis and Taylor, so we've got the trifecta up.
Yeah. Are we? No. Any further disclosures of interest or discussions? No. Mayoral minutes is item 4. There are no mayoral minutes. Item 5, confirmation of the August minutes. That's on page 4 of the agenda. Is that already edited? Yeah. Oh yeah, do you want to speak to that? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just refer to the minutes of the last meeting, in particular public participation. In the public participation, in error, we included in the report about public participation at the last meeting, in error, we included the questions and responses that between councillors and the presenter, and we, for the purposes of adopting the minutes, whilst we haven't been able to distribute them, they have been deleted. So we're asking the council to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting with the removal of the questions and responses made during the public presentation report item.
So is there a move? Councillor Lewis?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The other matter was on page 8, where it's referring to item 6 on page 8, my disclosure of interest there. The minutes stated that my wife is the volunteer project coordinator of the advisory committee. That's the Regional Art Development Fund advisory committee. She's not a volunteer. There are no volunteer project coordinators for the RADF advisory committee. She's a volunteer project coordinator of one of the applicants to that that fund. So that should read, is a volunteer project coordinator of one of the applicants rather than of the advisory committee.
I'm trying to, you say page 8.
Agenda page 8, minutes page 5.
Okay, yeah. Oh yeah, at the very bottom, yeah.
Point 6, yeah.
Okay. So Councillor Evers is moving it with those amendments. Is there a seconder? Councillor Maddern? Councillor Hanson?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just seeking some clarifications. Seeing I wasn't at that meeting, I was on leave of absence. Am I able to vote no? Yes?
Yeah. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 6.1, a report on public participation by the CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We had 4 people that participated in the public participation session. The first person was Barbara Sullivan, who presented a petition concerning wild dogs roaming in Glenwood, killing livestock and pets, and I believe that is to be submitted by Councillor Chapman. The second person was Jeannie Scott, who requested the council to purchase an additional parcel of land to build a new community hall. The third participant was Mr Don Scott, who raised concerns in relation to overgrown road verges, footpaths and private land holdings, and requested council to take action. Mr Scott also thanked council for attending to a number of issues, including house numbering, road works, governance workshops, small community advisory group meetings. And the last participant was Mr Graham Woad, who raised a number of matters, including, firstly, the conducting council meetings in small communities every 4 months or more on a more regular basis. Secondly, installing spring-loaded shut-off taps in public toilets. Thirdly, having more requesting that the bins in Queen's Park be emptied on a more regular basis. The fourth matter was requesting council to undertake a flash flood study. And the fifth and final matter, Mr Woad raised a number of concerns in relation to the conduct of the Australia Day Awards.
Thank you. Is there a mover for the motion that council note the verbal report provided by the Chief Executive Officer on the matters raised during public participation? Councillor Truscott, seconded Councillor Hanson. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is receipt of petitions, 8.1. Councillor Chapman. Got the mic there.
Thanks, Mr Mayor and Councillors. A petition to the Fraser Coast Council. This petition is to push for stricter rules regarding wandering pets around the Glenwood area and for stricter rules to enforce regarding this issue. The people of Glenwood have had enough. Summary: the community of Glenwood and surrounds and constantly had issues with wandering animals and the threatening nature they bring to the area. Residents are being forced to stop walking their pets during the day and are concerned about the safety of their pets. As well as their own personal safety, we would be able to exercise our animals and enjoy the Glenwood area without the fear of being approached or attacked. And now there's 207 signatures there, and I'd like to pass this on to the CEO. Thank you.
So the motion is that the petition be received and referred to the Chief Executive Officer. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Madden. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Are there any further petitions? The next item is the Open Resolutions Register on page 32, item 10.1.1. Were there any questions on this or discussion? Not. The recommendation is there on page 32 that it be received and noted. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Madden, seconded Councillor Chapman. Did you wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is page 67, item 10.2.1, making of subordinate law number 1, administration. So the recommendation is on page 67. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Light, is there a seconder? Councillor Chapman, did you wish to speak to it? Any speakers or questions? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.2, councillor meeting attendance for October, page 235. Yeah. Councillor Everard is moving the recommendation on page 235. Is there a seconder? Councillor Light. Any questions or discussion? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.3.1 on page 237 is the Animal Management Service Level Amendments. The recommendation is that Council endorse the Animal Management Service as detailed in Attachment 1 of this report. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Truscott, seconded Councillor O'Keefe. Did you wish to speak to this, Councillor?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the staff time in bringing this back to us. Thank you for that. It's good to see that we're looking to ultimately improve the services that we provide in animal management. I know this is something that we can often get a lot of contact from the community about, as we've even heard here locally this morning. But I'm just having some thoughts with, at the bottom of page 239, it says, and I appreciate that, we're looking to improve, and ultimately by the time we get to the proposal on the next page of 240, what we're proposing for January 2020, subject to resourcing, it looks like quite an improvement there, but it talks about that we're improving it from 1st of September, but I'm trying to understand, because it looks like actually a decrease there from September until changes could be proposed for January. So I'm just wanting to, it's like a bit of a decrease in hours there, but then hopefully it will be changed in January. And so I'm just wondering how that's an improvement, but then what assurance we might see that we can see those proposed changes become a reality in January.
The director or CEO?
Probably the director.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. So the transitional period from the 1st of July, if you actually have a look at the range of services there's inconsistencies between how we do things at the Hervey Bay and the Maryborough pounds, as well as in our service delivery out in the various communities. So what we've done from the 1st of September is standardise our hours and get to the point where we've got some equity across the entire region in the service levels, and then from subject to recruitment, and that recruitment so far is looking pretty good. We've got a couple of new positions which start in a couple of weeks' time, and a few more that we're going through the interview process at the moment. So once those additional staff come on board and are trained, go through all the inductions and the appropriate training, from the 1st of January we hope to expand the hours across the whole region. But yeah, the service level improvements, I suppose, as we would say them, from the 1st of September was about getting that consistency of service level across the region.
And if I can just add, if we're unable to achieve that service level standard by the 1st of January, we'll come back to council and let them know why.
Okay. Can I just add to that? So the proposal for January, which I think is great and should be of great benefit to the community, is that proposal expected to just come into effect, or does that need to come back for any other reason, or just once we get to January it just takes effect?
So once the council considers this matter, that gives us direction to make that come into effect 1st of January. It doesn't require further council resolution.
Any further questions or speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The expansion of services in Durham Heads and Howard Libraries, page 241. So the recommendation is from 241 to 242. Is there a mover for this? Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Light. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to say this is a great step forward to bring those two libraries into line with the other ones, and to offer more services out in that part of the world. I think it's a fantastic thing and should be commended.
Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.3.3, page 247, the biosecurity plan for 2019 to 2022. Councillor Madden, are you moving that? Yeah, thanks. Is there a seconder? Councillor Chapman?
Just a brief comment on this.
Yep.
I was actually in the state parliament at the time that this biosecurity plan, state government legislation, was put in place. It was actually the committee that I worked on, so I have kind of a little bit of an interest in this. But I think the thing that I'd like to bring to the awareness of the community is this is our management plan. It clearly states in the report, and I think the officers will confirm that's correct. If it's not, I need to know, that it doesn't have the force of law. It is a management plan for the Fraser Coast Regional Council area, and it sets out what we can do and what we can't do in terms of trying to manage these invasive species, both plants and animals. So just to be aware that it's a management plan, not a legal plan as such. The legality is under the Biosecurity Act of the State Parliament.
Can I just ask a question? So was there a seconder for that? Yeah, that's right. Just a question. Can you just outline where and when we would use 1080? And where it is in the report?
No is my simple answer. I would have to either see... I'd have to reread it. I have read this report many, many times, but getting quickly to that point would be a challenge for me right now, but I'm happy to take that on notice and come back. 358, is it?
My understanding is that that is regulated under the state government.
Okay, perhaps so I can just ask in practice, are you aware of us using it much?
So no, I'm not, and so the staff use essentially a whole range of chemical treatments, depending upon I suppose the scientific view on what's the most appropriate control mechanism for different pests. The general approach from our biosecurity team, but also our parks and environment teams as well, is to limit our use of any chemicals wherever we can, for a whole range of reasons. Obviously for staff safety and to ensure limited exposure, but there's also issues around cost, and you don't want to be wasting expensive chemicals if we can as well. So the staff try and limit the use. We use obviously the appropriate PPE, but as we've discussed in I think some previous meetings, we're also running some trials at the moment to try alternative methods to see if we can further limit our chemical use and look for other ways to control a whole range of biosecurity threats.
So I mean, my concern with 1080 is the cruel death it causes to the animals. My other concern is with glyphosate, which has been declared probably carcinogenic by the World Health Organization. Can you outline how far along we are with trials to no longer use it?
Yeah, glyphosate's a real challenge when we're talking about weed pests or plant pests instead of the animal pests. The challenge is that there isn't a lot of known long-range studies about alternative chemicals in use. We have a range of test sites going on at the moment, some in our own parks, with other chemical products, which we're hoping to report back by the end of this year. We also have some non-chemical trials going on as well, where we're doing some hand weeding on specific sites to see what's possible as well. So we're trying to deal with the chemical use issue both ways to see if we can use alternatives which may or may not be more safe, but also where it's appropriate to look at things like steam weeding, to look at hand weeding, to look at volunteer programs to try and remove seed banks and weeds that way as well. So we're trying to hit it in a whole range of areas, but we will be back by the end of this year with the trial results.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and councillors, I actually support this document. I think it's great that we bring out a document so our officers can actually, we've got guidelines and that to work to. And talking about 1080, saying it's a slow death, I've been off the land and I've seen dingoes actually pulling calves from cows when they've been birthing, and I've actually gone to people's places where I've seen sheep being torn apart. Now, talking about a slow death, I'd rather see a dingo die of a slow death than seeing a newborn calf being eaten by a dingo. And so I look at saying that there's alternative solutions, but at the moment, when we've got to be able to control these animals as wild animals. I got a phone call last night, actually, from a gentleman that rang me and asked me about in River Heads, right at near the point of River Heads, he saw a rabbit. And he said, I didn't realise that rabbits were in this area, what should I do? And I said, report it. So the compliance officers know that rabbits are starting to come down into this area. Now, that rabbit could have been brought by someone as a pet from somewhere and it's got away. But these are the things that we've got to make sure that as a community we all work together, and if you see something like this, report it straight away so it can be nipped in the bud right before it escalates, such as noxious weeds. If there's a major concern in the region with rat's tail grass, and also with the dry weather, people are buying horse feed and cattle feed from other areas up north where there's Bithynium weed. Now, we've got to be very careful that we don't bring Bithynium weed into this region, because that's going to be something else that we're going to be chasing. And so I'd just like the public to, if they see any of these weeds or see a weed they're not sure of, just get rid of it. just get rid of, burn it, get rid of it. Don't burn it at the moment until you get a permit. But just do it. Yeah, but what? Yeah, yeah. I was quite surprised at something like this. But this could have been someone's pet that got out, and yeah. So I do support this. I think that these sort of documents give the officers some guidelines where to move. So thank you.
Councillor Hanson had his hand up first.
Yeah. Well, Councillor Hanson had to drive the furthest, Councillor Taylor, so it's probably... Well, thank you, Mr Chairman. Look, Councillor Chapman stole a lot of my points. Just I want to speak as a landholder as well. I don't particularly like the use of 1080, but there really is no alternative in a lot of ways. I concur with Councillor Chapman. I've seen dingoes eating calves as they've been born. I've seen them eat the cows' tongues out as they're giving birth, and that's not a very nice thing. And if you can shoot a dingo, it's much better than poison them. But we need to be able to have the ability to go out there and to coordinate with landholders to bait wild dogs and dingoes, and also rabbits. There are plagues and plagues of rabbits, and the only way you can get rid of those things is through baiting as well in the long term. So look, I support this document. I think it's a good thing. It gives our staff something to work with, and I understand and I share the concerns about 1080. I think that it is a questionable product at best, but there really is no alternative at this stage.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to, I guess, the references on page 355, 358 and 359, and there are other similar references where, for example, under management goal, Fraser Coast Regional Council on page 355, to ensure European foxes are effectively managed on all lands in the Fraser Coast region, council to lead in coordinated baiting and trapping programs and supply baiting materials to landowners. And obviously there's meant to be more words there, but there's something missing. Every other time that we've looked at these, when it's referred to baiting, it's always referred to the type of baiting, 1080. And obviously, every time it's referred to that, I've voted against this document. I then note that again on page 358, instead of referring to 1080, it refers to baiting. And then again on 359, it refers to baiting again. I guess my question is, why is there a change? And if 1080 is not referred to in this document, what document is now being used to authorise council to actually use that chemical of 1080?
So through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Taylor, for your question. I suppose the authorisation, as Councillor Madden said, doesn't effectively come for this in terms of the head of power is actually the state legislation, which requires us to have a plan. I think I'm sure we actually mentioned it here. Technically, it doesn't actually require councillor approval to actually have the biosecurity plan. It is a management document, and that's what the state legislation says the way we should handle it. But I take your point. I can assure you, at least from my point of view, there was no deliberate exclusion of that. I haven't spoken to the individual staff specifically who wrote the document to understand why they took that out from previous biosecurity plans. And to be totally honest, this is the first your question is the first that I'm actually knowing that the specific product was in previous documents and isn't in this one. So I'm able to go back and talk to the staff and ask them what the rationale behind that was. I suspect it's just that they're saying this is the mechanism, and we will use, you know, whatever products. In this case, it happens to be 1080 for that mechanism. But I don't know the justification for why they've taken it out. The document has been, you know, circulated quite widely. It obviously flows from the state legislation and then the regional plan. Lots of people have had input into it, and it's been around for quite some time. But yeah, as I said, it's the first that I'm actually understanding that specific reference has been removed.
Well, can I ask one more question? Is it your understanding that the term baiting would include 1080?
Councillor Lewis?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a comment on the 1080 issue. I too have significant reservations, and to the extent that it is possible to avoid using a product such as that, then I think we ought to be looking for those options. I don't know that that's going to, you know, mean that I'll vote against the plan, because there's so much other valuable material in the plan, but I think it's a false dichotomy to start arguing that one level of cruelty is more significant than another level of cruelty, and I'll make 2 points about that. It's fallacious to compare how a dingo behaves as a moral agent compared to how we behave as moral agents, because in fact, clearly, we have a greater moral responsibility for appropriate behaviour than the dingo has, who's simply trying to eat. And the second point is, the dingo doesn't get a choice about being born a dingo. The fox doesn't get a choice about being born a fox. It behoves us, where we need to control them, to do that in as humane and appropriate manner as we can. And to that extent, I think we should be using every endeavour to ensure that we don't use agents such as 1080, except perhaps as a very last resort.
Let us scream too, David.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a couple of points. I think the term baiting has probably been put in there rather than 1080, because I am aware that there are alternatives being trialled by the state government, and they would quite possibly then become the mode for baiting. It may not be 1080, it may be the alternative product. So I think that just the general terminology is good, because it may allow us the flexibility to use alternative products that may be less problematic. The other thing I think I'd like to point out very clearly is, under the Biosecurity Act, everybody has a responsibility. It's not council's responsibility. It's council's responsibility for the land that we have control of, but it is the responsibility of every citizen of this state to ensure that they abide by this Biosecurity Act. And this biosecurity plan for the Fraser Coast, I think, is a very, very good document for individual landholders to understand what pests we have, what the issues are, and what the resolution may be. So it may be just control, or it may be not allowing that pest or animal to actually be here at all. So exclusion, or there's a range of regimes here as to which plants we can keep out, which ones we have to manage, which ones we can confine to certain areas. So that's the purpose of this document. But the actual Biosecurity Act has the individual has a responsibility, the legal responsibility, and there are legal penalties for failure to comply.
The motion's moved by Councillor Maddern, seconded by Councillor Chapman.
Did you ask for and against? Because I simply asked a
That
question.
was the right of reply.
So
I thought you did speak against.
no, I asked 2 questions. I didn't indicate whether I was going to be. I didn't realise we were at the point where we were doing fors and against.
Okay. Oh, if you're welcome to speak against. Yeah. For?
Or for. I'll be speaking against it. This is a really good plan. There's a lot of work and a lot of good. Since I've been involved in council, I've held a concern for 1080, and it's my aspiration that by voting against this every time, that I'm signalling from a community perspective that there needs to be another solution. 1080, just recently, there's been examples even on the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, where dogs have eaten 1080 and died, where it's created a risk to the community, and I don't believe it's a safe product. And for that reason, I understand that it may be the only suitable option now, but by voting against this each time, I'm signalling to the council that there are people within the community that want a change, and I'd like to see a change.
If there are no more speakers for or against, I'll give. You have already spoken in favour.
One question
Yeah.
to the officer. If dingoes haven't got a choice to be a dingo and a fox hasn't got a choice to be a fox, have they got a choice not to live in the Fraser Coast?
You don't, you'll take that as a comment, or I'll say. Is it? Yeah. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All opposed? 2. That's carried. Oh, sorry. 8. Sorry, I counted that wrong. 8-3. That's carried 8-3. The next item is item 10.3.4, Pyalba Skate Park Lighting. That's page 363. Yeah, okay. Councillor Matt? No? Councillor Madden?
I was going to move
Yeah?
the officer's recommendation, but if someone's got questions, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, Councillor Madden's indicating she'd like to move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? No? Oh, Councillor Everard. Councillor Light?
Yeah, my question is to the director or the CEO regarding signage. And look, I haven't been there, so there might be signage, so I do apologise. But if there isn't signage there in relation to this, is closing times. I think if there was signage there that does express a closing time, that reinforces any action from police or our security staff that can refer to that closure sign. So I'd like to, one, ask the question to the director, is there any closure signs?
So I can answer that question. I believe there isn't any signage in relation to closing times, and I'll make sure that we do put signage up.
So that doesn't have to be part of a resolution? This part of
No,
resolution?
I can do that.
You can do that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Just to the mover, Mr. Chair, would you consider revising your motion based on discussions on Monday to an 8:30 time rather than a 9 o'clock?
Yes, I'd be happy if the seconder is, given that I've had comments from school teachers about they would really, really like to have lesser hours. Yeah. So that moves it to 8:30.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Mr. Mayor, I'll be seeking an amendment
Yeah.
to the original motion.
Yeah, you're moving an amendment?
Yeah, moving an amendment. Councillors, the Anzac Park skate park in Maryborough is currently open 7 days a week, and the lights remain on until 9 p.m. I want to commend this council for acting in the interest of the wider community by providing access to an engaging, active, safe, family-friendly space. Council has demonstrated its commitment to building active communities, and as the newest member of the council team, I'm proud of our achievements. I'm passionately committed to improving access to open spaces, and I would like to seek amendment I'd like to seek an amendment today that the installed lights be operated at skate side until 8:30 p.m. every night, with a gradual reduction to zero luminosity. And the reason that I would like, and that I am seeking a gradual reduction of luminosity, is that it actually sends a signal out to the community that it's wind down time, and it facilitates a more efficient and effective movement of people from the venue. And I'll also be seeking that the shelter lighting at the Pyalba Skate Bowl be switched off at the same time. Further to that, I apologise, it's school holidays. I ask that the Harvey Bay Skateside lighting be operated in support of my amendment. I think it's important that we recognise that the Skateside element at Harvey Bay is part of a broader seafront parklands
Councillor O'Keefe,
group.
you've sort of identified so far the amendment, I think, pretty much, although you haven't
Yep.
really articulated it
Yep.
as an actual amendment. What we'll need, before you start speaking to it, we'll need to see if there's a seconder to it. So
Okay.
just for clarity,
No.
you sort of,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good.
so
Yep.
so one stays the same, you're saying? Approve the funding of lighting of Pialba Skate to proceed immediately,
Yep.
and then you're changing to
7 days a week.
7 days a week instead of Friday and Saturday until 8:30 still?
And then a 30-minute reduction.
The 30-minute reduction. Yeah. So is there a seconder for that proposed amendment?
So the shelter lights would just switch off at the designated
Yeah.
time, but the actual Skateside stage lighting, if you will, would be phased down over a period of half an hour. So it would go from 100% luminosity down to, in increments of, say, 90, 80, 70, until it gets down to zero. And that facilitates a more effective and efficient movement of
Okay.
people.
Is there a seconder for that proposed amendment? Councillor Sanderson, you're seconding that? Okay, so now we'll speak to whether we'll debate the amendment. Just for, sorry, Councillor, I think you said 8:30.
8:30.
Yeah.
Just to help the minute clerks, so item 1 would stay the same. Item 2, that the installed lights be operated until 8:30 p.m. every night, with a gradual reduction to zero luminosity by 10 p.m. is what I've
No.
by
9 p.m.
by 9 p.m. And the third one, that the shelter lighting at the Pialba Skate Bowl be operated until 9 p.m. every night.
That's correct.
Okay, so now we're moving on to well, I guess first of all, I'll ask the mover and seconder, are they happy with those amendments? Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not happy with
Okay,
the
yeah.
amendment. And then what I was
Yeah.
going to say is I haven't actually had an opportunity to speak to the motion. I flagged that I was going to move it. We got a seconder, and then I did.
Yeah, and then somebody
There's-
proposed an
yeah,
amendment.
Yeah, and I had
Yeah.
no opportunity to speak.
Yeah. So we're discussing the proposed amendment now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
wouldn't normally the mover be able to speak to a motion before an amendment?
I don't think so. An amendment can be moved at any time. Yeah. Okay, we will have to. I know I'd normally give you a lot of latitude in terms of debating rules, but we will. I will take your point. I'll be asking for speakers for and against.
Sorry,
and
I
questions.
was seeking advice. So yeah, I'm happy to accept the advice as it is.
Yeah, any questions? So does Zane get the right to speak now first as the mover of the amendment?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You go back to where you were.
Okay. Yeah, look, councillors, as I said before, we have precedent here with the Anzac Park Skateside facility operating 7 days a week, providing family-friendly, active entertainment to our community in Maryborough. And so I think that it would be right for us to do the same in Harvey Bay. And I think it's also important to recognise that the skateside element at Harvey Bay is part of a broader seafront parklands group of attractions, and as such, it's part of a tourist hub. So, and these kind of attractions are critical to our tourist industry. They're of great benefit to our community because it gets our families and people outdoors, away from screens, away from TVs, and enjoying an active lifestyle. And yeah, I can commend the resolution.
Yeah. Councillor, are you speaking against? Yeah, a question, yeah.
It's through the chair to the director. First question is, did you consider nightly operation hours? And if you did consider, why did you then make a recommendation for just the limited hours that you've stated?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Taylor. We did, both myself and my staff considered this matter at length, as councillors are today. We came down on the, noting that there's a whole range of stakeholders who have desires, needs around this precinct. We've built something as a community which is a fantastic resource for local young people as well as for visitors to the region. But rightly or wrongly, we have also approved housing development very close to this facility. So in the officer's opinion, we thought that it was acceptable on weekends to have a later operating period. Generally, most people or a lot of people don't necessarily have to get up as early or don't necessarily have as many work commitments. So essentially we came to the point that we thought this was in line with how society operates, and in that, people should be able to expect an earlier finish during the week when they have other commitments, and then we were hoping that residents might be comfortable with a bit more disruption on weekends where that generally happens right across the community.
Councillor, so you're speaking against? A question, yeah?
Yes, a question to the Director, if I may, and it relates to the proposal to dim the lights over a 30-minute period. As I understand it, the proposal to put these extra lights in is a safety issue in terms of it's going to provide sufficient illumination for safe operation of the skate bowl components in particular. My concern is to know whether if we dim them over a 30-minute period, that's going to be such a gradual reduction in light intensity that it may encourage users of the skate bowl to continue to use it and the frog in the slowly boiling water, they'll be using it to a point where they don't detect quickly enough that the light is not really good enough to continue using it. That's the sort of technical question I'm concerned about, and I suppose linked to that, will that have the impact of in effect giving a 20-minute extension to this period because of the fact that they will not be encouraged to cease by a more rapid diminution over 10 minutes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Lewis. At the risk of getting into a bit of human psychology, which I'm not necessarily qualified for, how we believe it will operate is that either can work, but how we believe it will operate is that when you start to dim the lights, you will get, I believe, your families, people with younger kids, I think will exit the facility or start to exit the facility. The hardcore skaters, and I think I mentioned to councillors, I've been down there several times at night time where we don't actually have lighting on the bowl, but we do have light spill from the shelters. And the reality is that the hardcore skaters will continue to skate it even when we turn off the skate bowl lights until the shelter lights go off. I think the trigger will be at that, subject to this motion, which is on the table. If that was council's decision, I think it would encourage the families or the younger children to start exiting the facility as the lights go down, particularly if we sign it well and explain that is the process and that it is closing. And then I think you'll have your more hardcore skaters who will wait until all of the lights turn off before they exit the facility.
We've had a speaker in favour of the amendment. I'll speak against it, and I'll speak not just against the amendment, but if the amendment's not passed, against the motion, as well as foreshadowing a motion of my own. My view on this is when we passed this skate park, the arguments about why we needed a new skate park a few hundred metres from the old one was about crime prevention through environmental design, that because of the amount of families and older parents around, that it would become safer, that you wouldn't have the antisocial behavior. And it was possible to argue that at the time, and it was argued that this would be a safer place, that it wouldn't have the reported bad activities as the old one. And it was possible to report that because lights weren't in the design. It wasn't proposed that when we passed the skate park that it be lit at night. So that you could argue that families would be around on picnic tables, but I don't think that can be arguable at night when it's darkness all around it. I'm opposed to lighting it. I'm foreshadowing a motion that lights not be installed at the Paialba skate park, and that the shelter lights be dimmed approximately 1 hour after sunset, and further that the possibility of installing lighting at the Torquay Terrace skate park be investigated. Councillor Madden.
May I speak against the amendment?
Yeah, this is Councillor O'Keefe's one.
Yes.
Well, now I just spoke against it, so we now need, we'll see if there's a speaker in favour of it. Yeah, you will. Yeah. Councillor Truscott, are you speaking in favour of the amendment? Yes? Questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 questions. I wonder if it might be considered, if perhaps instead of a 30-minute gradual change, if it were to be changed to, say, the adoption of what the Maryborough skate park has, which is what I understand, and the director may be able to confirm, it has just a 10-minute, it just drops. 10 minutes before it goes off, it just drops to, I think, just half the luminosity, and then it turns off. So that would be a question if whether that would be considered instead of a gradual change to just adopt the same as what the Maryborough skate park has. That's the first question, and I've got one other question.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to answer the technical question, but I'm not sure whether I can or not.
No, I mean, it would all depend on the hardware on the site that we've. Yeah.
So the question is, would he be prepared to change his amendment
To use what Maryborough has?
10 minutes. That's the question.
To adopt the same system that the Maryborough skate park has.
Would you be prepared to change your amendment?
So instead of 30 minutes, 10 minutes.
Well, when comparisons were made to the Maryborough skate park, and the Maryborough skate park doesn't do a 30-minute gradual change, it does a 10-minute prior to turning off, it dims, and then at 9 o'clock it shuts off.
Okay. So still gradual reduction of luminosity.
Except it's not 100% down, it's just a change to half and then off.
Yeah. Because we don't want to be in a situation where we switch the lights off and someone is mid-flight.
Well, that could potentially always
thank
happen.
you.
But
I agree with that.
so to adopt the...
Yeah,
the
and
Maryborough.
Councillor Sanderson, are you happy with that as a seconder? Yep. Okay. Councillor Truscott, are you speaking in favour of the amendment now?
My second question
Yeah.
was, I note that in the report it talks on page 364 in the last sentence of the proposal, section 5, it talks about the poles also provide additional location points for CCTV monitoring. I would like to see that it not just have the points, but if they're going to have poles go up, that we actually make it a priority to install CCTV at the location as well. So I'd be asking if we have that capability to do it, can that be added either as a third point, that CCTV be investigated as a priority to install at the location?
So is that another amendment?
Be investigated as a priority to
Can we
install.
not deal with that separately afterwards as a totally separate motion?
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, if it can be added on, then it's dealt
Well,
with.
there's only a certain amount of amendment you can do to a motion before it's not really an amendment.
Yeah, okay, but I'm just thinking...
I think we can deal with this as a totally separate after the decision is made on lighting.
Yeah?
Yeah, or
Okay.
or while we're
All right, I'll do that in general business.
Is there? I'm getting to you. So we had a speaker for and a speaker against. Is there another speaker for? Is there now speakers for or against? Councillor Madden. Yeah, the amendment. Yes or no?
So basically, I wish to speak against the amendment. I do understand about the Maryborough one, but I also understand the issues raised by the Mayor about the fact that lighting wasn't publicised. and that there's probably more residential properties immediately impacted by this one than what there is in Maryborough. There's just 2 houses, the rest of it's basically commercial. The reason that I moved this amendment, I moved this motion, is because I thought it was a good compromise, and on that basis I need to vote against the proposed amendment because it takes out that compromise.
Councillor Lewis, are you speaking in favour? You're speaking against, yep, because there's no more speakers for. Okay, before we have another against, we'll have a speaker for. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I'm in support, as you know. In relation to this amendment, I think it's one thing we can't forget is youth. We've all been there, just a part of our future, as all of us are. And to have them in one area, I think lighting the facility, it's not just good for them, it'll be good for families, it'll be good for the younger ones, the older ones. Many benefits will happen by having this. I think restricting the time limits is good. As Maryborough, being born and bred in Maryborough, lived there my whole life, seeing what has happened at the Maryborough Skate facility has been great. And one of the things we did with my colleague, Paul Truscott, was we met with the young leaders or the influencers within the community that have now taken ownership of that facility. And a lot of, even with graffiti, there might be one that might try and push the line, but when they do, they'll make their mate pick up rubbish. They'll do those types of things. So I think having this controlled, I think it's a good thing that we can turn the lights off at a certain time. I think the nearby residents, I definitely understand their frustrations or point of views in relation to having the facility lit, but we can't forget that the facility is now built. It's now being used by our community. There's probably a lot of people there right now. And to allow it for a couple of more hours at night time, I think is fantastic. And I'm very happy to support this motion because we're controlling it well. I think sometimes to control things, we can't control it. We can't fully take control. We'll let the people control it as well. So I think this is a great outcome and I'm very happy to support this amendment.
Councillor Lewis. You're speaking against the amendment?
Yes,
Yep.
thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I understand and appreciate the points raised by the proponents of the motion. They're not without merit. However, there are 2 reasons why I'm going to oppose the amendment. One is the matters referred to by the director. That is the compromise between the rights of the users of the skate park and the rights of the nearby residents. It's fairly clear. I won't go into that in any detail. The second is really relating to the question of the security, which the Mayor adverted to when we discussed this way back. That is the additional security offered by the fact that families will be there, and that those families will in effect provide a level of surveillance and security which will keep rougher elements under some sort of control. Now, it seems to me that that's not nearly as likely to be available or to happen on weeknights, both because those sorts of families will often want to make sure their children are at home doing their homework on school nights, but secondly because the members of those families will be in many respects working people themselves, and so they won't have the opportunity or the inclination to go out Monday to Thursday or whatever when they've got their own working lives to look after. So I think the opportunity for families to be there is much greater on a Friday, Saturday night, so we gain those security benefits on those nights where we may not do on the other nights. So overall I'm in favour of the Friday, Saturday option.
Is there another speaker in favour of the amendment? Well, I'll come to you if it's right of reply when everyone's had their when everyone who wants to. Are there any further speakers or questions? Are you speaking? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, I'd just like to put my point across. As I made my point very clear when this facility was being built. We had a facility 300 metres away from this facility, and now we've actually got 2 facilities within 300 metres away. we were told then that when we build this facility, I know it was a resolution by a previous council, and then it was voted on, and it was a council resolution that we build this facility. But I look at it as the money that's gone into this facility, and we used to see people down there in that open space training. There would be 30 or 40 people. I don't know where they've gone now because they're no longer there. But we've moved a facility that was in a commercial area, such as beside Woolworths and beside commercial shops, and we've moved it down in front of residents. And we've also, what I find hard is, those residents have been told that when this facility gets built, it will not have any lights. Now we're actually going to put lights on it. So how does that look as a council when we tell the residents that we're not lighting it, and then we set it all up and we do light it? The other thing is we're talking about families going down. I went down the other night and walked around down there, and I never saw any families. There was just young girls in a big group, and then there was young blokes that were on the skate park using the skate park. I think that we're looking for families. We've got to be looking for other areas. We're not just looking for the skate park. Families, I feel, very few will go there at night time to use the skate park. I feel that if you want to take your family there, you take your wife and that there during the day when it's open and a lot clearer. But I have been against this all because now I look at what this cost the community as to build this facility, and we've got a facility just around the corner. I'd like to know what it would have been like if we would have put this money into the existing one and put the money into lighting, put the money into CCTV, what that facility would have looked like. But no, that facility was snubbed on, and now this new facility is getting everything which the other one should have had. So I would be voting clearly against it.
Before I go to Councillor O'Keefe, I'll just check first there's no further speakers, and then I'll go to the CEO just to make it entirely clear to everyone what we're voting on. We're voting on an amendment to the motion. So if we pass the amendment, it becomes the motion. If we don't pass the amendment, then we go back to the original motion with my foreshadowed motion in the background. But I'll call upon the CEO to read out and clarify exactly what we're voting on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the officer's recommendation number 1 remains the same, that is to approve the funding of lighting of the Powerba Skate Park to proceed immediately. The second part of the motion is that the installed lights be operated until 8:30 p.m. every night, with a reduction to zero luminosity by 8:40 p.m. That's 10 minutes time frame. So the discussion between yourself and Councillor O'Keefe was about reducing the 30-minute time frame to 10 minutes, and that's what Councillor O'Keefe agreed to. So I'm assuming that it's still 8:30, but instead of being finished at 9, it's going to be finished by 8:40. That's the understanding. The third part of the motion is that shelter lighting at the Powerba Skate Bowl be operated until 9 p.m. every night. That's the amendment to the motion that I believe is on the table.
Councillor O'Keefe, you have a right of reply.
Councillors, my amendment is in the spirit of the original officer recommendation, in that my amendment is about safety, security and amenity. It's about 3 things. It's critically important that if you have concerns around safety and security, that you shine a light on that site. If you are concerned about the behaviour of people at a site, you shine a light on it. You don't leave that site in the dark. I have concerns around security. I'm concerned about amenity and I'm concerned about safety. I think it's really important that we consider this amendment in that light. Safety, security, and amenity. My amendment seeks to address all of those issues and will allow for a consistent approach between the Maryborough facility and a consistent approach with the Anzac facility. And that's all that I'm seeking.
I'll now put the motion. If this passes, it becomes the motion we discuss. If this loses, then we go back to the original recommendation moved by the other councillors. All in favour of the amendment? 3. All opposed? That must be 8. 8. That's lost 8-3. We'll go back to the original motion moved by Councillor Maddern, seconded by Councillor Everard. Did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, and I guess the conversation, we've had a reasonable amount of debate around this. I'd just like to reiterate that I think this is a good compromise, taking into account what was said in the past and also taking into account some of the security and safety issues that you've raised. So, yes, we did. So Darren and I both agreed to the amendment to 8:30. So,
Councillor Everard, yeah. Are there any speakers against? I mean, I'll just reiterate what I said already. My foreshadowed motion is that we don't light it, that we turn the shelter lights off an hour after sunset, and that we investigate the lighting of the original nearby and perfectly good skate park. So I'll be voting against. Councillor Lewis?
that was just for the Friday and Saturday. So the only change was
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking for the motion as it currently stands, and I just wanted to add a bit of information. I had inspected it last night myself at about 7 p.m. And just for everyone's information, there were then maybe 12 to 15 people there, mostly young people, sitting in the two shelters. No one actually skating on the skate bowl itself at that time. I was there for 10 or 15 minutes. There was a young fellow skating on the footpath opposite, on the resident sides. Apparently, it appeared waiting for someone to pick him up. These people appeared to me to be, perhaps in their mid to late teens. They were all behaving themselves. My observation from the resident side of the street in terms of noise was that while there was traffic going past, you couldn't hear any conversation at all. You couldn't hear anything but the traffic. When there was no traffic going by, you could hear voices, but they were only at a conversational level. They weren't a nuisance, and if you were inside in a house with your doors closed, you wouldn't have heard it at all. In terms of lighting, my observation was that from my level, at street level, I could see the lights. They weren't particularly obtrusive, and I appreciate that they're not the lights we're talking about. No, I appreciate that. But the existing lighting, clearly it was more lit than you might be in some other parts of the community. If you were, for instance, on the Esplanade of Paolba, you wouldn't see that level of lighting, but it wasn't too bad. My observation also was that as far as I could tell, if you were residing in one of those houses, bearing in mind they're mostly two-storey houses, if you're on the upper level, the foliage from the fig trees would have obscured the bulk of the lighting. My conclusion was that it wouldn't be too big an imposition on the amenity of those residents, especially if, as the motion proposes, we limit it to Friday and Saturday nights. In terms of surveillance, I didn't notice any parents with these young people. As I say, they were of an age where they wouldn't necessarily have parents. I did notice while I was there a couple, perhaps 30-ish, walking past, going for a walk, holding hands, and they would obviously have provided some level of security and oversight, and I expect that that's not an unlikely thing to be happening at 7 o'clock. So I'm comfortable with the motion as it stands.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Councillor Chapman.
Just clearly what I said before, Mr. Mayor. Just clearly what I spoke against with the previous motion.
Any speakers in favour?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I I remember as someone involved in law enforcement, particularly in Logan City, Brisbane and the Gold Coast. I remember when skating was considered as a seedy underworld rather than a recreation and sporting activity. I remember when skating, people felt it equaled crime, and still I think in some regards we talk it like that. I love the fact that councils, state government, local governments, communities have embraced this type of activity that says that we value not only families to come and use this space, not only young kids to come and use this space, we've seen 50-year-olds come and use this space, but also people, young people who feel as though they are on the fringes of society, that we value them. That's why I like the precinct that is being established there. A young, vibrant space, and the skate park, the adventure park, Seafront Oval are all parts of that. And I really like the fact that we are providing a service for young teenagers to engage and to stay fit and to feel as though they are valued within our community. I don't think it's onerous to have lights on a precinct like that. It's a great community investment, and I think when we look back on it, we'll see how much of an impact it has had in curbing attitudes, particularly in those young, impressionable children who grow up to contribute later on in society. So I will be supporting this motion.
Are there any further speakers against? Speakers at all? I'll give Councillor Madden the right of reply then.
Enough said.
That being it, everybody's clear on the motion. Do you want to just read it out again? Because it has changed by half an hour from the recommendation. Yeah. And do we need to give reasons why we changed it from the recommendation?
No, because it's not possible. The recommendation is that approve the funding of lighting of the Palba Skate Park to proceed immediately, and number 2, approve the operation of the lighting to be for special events and Friday and Saturday nights until 8:30 p.m, when the lighting is gradually reduced over a 10-minute period, with only shelter and path lights remaining functional thereafter.
So, can I just clarify? We're then saying the shelter will always. Oh, this is just Friday and Saturday. Okay, sorry. I'll put the motion. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 5, 9. All opposed? 2. That's carried 9-2. The next item is item 16.1.1 in the supplementaries. The organisational performance report. Is there a mover for that it be received? Page 476. Councillor Everard, seconded Councillor Hanson. Were there any questions or speakers? There's no questions. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Another supplementary item is item 16.1.2. That's on the separate one. Councillor requests for leave. Councillor Everard. Yeah. Yeah. Is there a mover for this? Councillor Taylor, second Councillor Madden.
Just a point of clarity. What page are we on this?
Yeah. It's
on. It's just been brought to my attention that I may be required to attend some matters for personal leave between the 14th of October and the 24th of October. I've quickly done an application for leave on the app, which should have been received. Is it appropriate that I make a formal request now, despite there not being any paperwork, but it is coming through, that I...
Yeah. Yeah, we can still move the motion here, yeah. Yep. So we'll deal with that one separately to this one. So was this moved by yourself for Councillor Everard and seconded Councillor Lewis? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would be seeking personal leave from the 14th of October to 25th of October, which includes 2 ordinary council briefings but no council meetings. So is there one?
So
So two mandatory.
just through the mayor, I believe that it's only the council meetings that require leave of absence as per the Local Government Act, and that for mandatory meetings or other meetings that can be simply filled, the form filled out and approved by either the mayor or CEO.
Should I put 23rd of the 10th is a council meeting?
Sorry, yeah, I've just read the. Yeah, it would be a council meeting as well.
So for that period. So which dates was it again? The 14th to the 25th?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll put the motion. Oh, sorry. Is there a
Sorry,
mover for that?
Can I just clarify?
Yeah.
It's more than likely that I will be back on the morning of the council
The
council
23rd.
meeting, but I just wanted to cover
Yeah.
it just in case.
Okay, yeah. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Sanderson, seconded Councillor Everard. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Yep. Councillor Chapman.
On the 14th of October, 3 councils are going to be in Cairns at the LGAQ conference. Now, that's actually a council and executive briefing, so we can just do the paperwork. We don't have to put that through a meeting.
Yeah, just through the mayor. That's right. Just fill in the request for leave for that period. The reason we left that mandatory meeting there was in case there's urgent business that needs to that I need to provide a briefing to councillors on.
Okay, we'll go to general business. Is there any general business? Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to bring to the council's attention on the event that we had yesterday, the media call with the emergency services at the Cultural Centre. This is to echo the event on the 4th of October, Friday, Food and Groove, where we'll have a significant program for Get Ready. It will be the biggest thing we've ever done for Get Ready. There will be the emergency services representatives there, full-time professionals and our great volunteers, SES and the Rural Fire Service. So we're planning quite an event, so I ask everyone if you can come along and support it. This is to get ready for the storm season. And also, we've also got to remember, we're also facing continuously a very bad fire season. Now, I was asked the other day by a radio station with our fire season technically is ending very soon, but we're seeing fire weather and behaviour very similar to the southern states, and I think we'll see it until we get some rain, so we've got to be conscious of that. So I ask all the residents to make sure they've got their fire plans ready. Thank you.
Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two quick things. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Director Naidu and his staff for what they're doing with the Anzac Park lighting. I know that Councillor Sanderson and I have been working with them and looking at putting together plans, so thank you for that. But to follow up from what we were mentioning previously, I'd like to ask if can ask for a report for the light poles at the skate park area to have an investigation for CCTV points to be installed on those poles as a priority.
Do you need a motion to bring that report? Yeah. Would you like a motion?
So we were planning to actually bring that back to council anyway, but if you would like to move a motion.
Oh, look, if it's already in the, if that will be coming back to council, that's fine.
We were holding off to determine whether the lights were going up. If the lights were going to be installed, it was our intention that we bring back to council that we install CCTV cameras.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Any further general business? Councillor Taylor.
Just a question through the chair to either the director or the CEO, and it may be a question taken on notice. Are you seeing, based on the current weather, an increase in complaints in developments progressing with dust management from residents? And if so, how are we trying to mitigate that?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Baird. Thank you, Councillor. The answer is yes. We are getting more complaints about that. To be fair, both at private development sites as well as council sites as well. So it's not just the private development industry, but we've got a big role to play ourselves in that. We've been active over the last month. We've been out visiting all of the development sites and meeting with the developers, encouraging good behaviour in terms of things that people could do themselves in terms of sediment traps and fencing, as well as wetting down sites where that's possible as well. So we'll continue to do that. We're active on the ground. We've got all our development engineers out in the field a lot more than they normally would be at the moment to try and do that. And we're obviously also talking with our infrastructure teams and my own parks teams about our own projects as well, to make sure that we're being fair and not expecting other people to do things that we're not doing ourselves. Even things we've made some initiatives we just signed off the other day for some additional fencing, for example, out at the Avion precinct to catch the dust that's coming off that site that we've recently finished, because with the weather it is a significant issue. So we're conscious of it, we're working hard on it, but it's a constant battle, and we really need some rain to fix it for us.
Is there any further general business? Councillor Chapman.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to say that I had a conflict of interest with the Hospice Committee, and I wasn't with any of the decision making on the block of land. But on behalf of the Hospice Committee, I'd actually like to thank the councillors for the location of the site for the new hospice. And the Hospice Committee are grateful for it, and we're now in the process of getting designs. We've got a project manager on board. We are now bringing this hospice project forward, and it's all full steam ahead. So hopefully in about 18 months we'll be able to cut the ribbon for a hospice in this region. And I'd just like to thank the councils again for their decision making on their location. Thank you.
Are there any further general business? I just wanted to raise one issue. Over the last few days, the CEO has been in discussions with the Glenwood Progress Association about making the former SCS shed right next door to us the Glenwood men's shed, and that seems possible. And it's what we're going for now. And we've just allocated $10,000 from discretionary funds to towards the establishment of that. So hopefully very soon the shed right next door to us will be the men's shed here in Glenwood. We'll now need to move into the confidential section of the agenda. So I'm very sorry to be kicking the Glenwood Progress Association and Glenwood out of your own hall. But we'll be in confidential. I can't tell you exactly for how long, maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. Probably more the former than the latter. Yeah, we should be out by 5. Once it's 5:05, we'll be done. But I hope you can stick around. We have to go into confidential to discuss matters that people can profit from or that are confidential for different reasons. And then we come out and we actually make the decisions then. So I'll take a motion now that Council resolves that under the Local Government Regulation 2012, the meeting be closed to the public. That's moved by Councillor Madden, seconded by Councillor Everard. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Yep. 15.2, release of coastal hazard vulnerability and preliminary risk assessment maps. This is moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Madden. And tabling the maps now. Table the maps and put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.5, expressions of interest to lease council facilities. Sorry, what happened? Sorry. 15.3, sorry. Maryborough City Hall, remove floorboards, page 389. This is moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Chapman. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.4, the Fraser Coast Residential Air Park, page 445, moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Truscott. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.5, expressions of interest to lease council facilities, moved by Councillor Hanson, seconded by Councillor Everard, and this is an amendment. Do you want to read out the amendment and then speak if you wish?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After some further discussions with the officers in relation to this, I'd like to suggest we delete recommendation 2 and replace recommendation 2 with the following motion that pursuant to the Local Government Regulation 2012, Chapter 6, etc., which permits council to dispose of an interest in land, a valuable non-current asset, to a community organisation without inviting tenders or conducting an auction, council resolves to dispose of the interest in the land by entering into leases for terms of 10 years with the Tyro and District Chamber of Commerce over Part 1 of Lot SP 248792 Main Street, Tyro. And a further additional recommendation that if the Tyro and District Chamber of Commerce has not executed a lease over Part 1 of the said land by the 25th of September 2022, a further report be presented to Council for a review of the approval to lease the council facility.
This is moved by Councillor Hanson, seconded by Councillor Everard. Do you wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.6 is the lease renewal for the Tyro Medical Centre, page 456, moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Light. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.7, request for infrastructure agreement under Infrastructure Charges Incentive Policy 2019. This again is a slightly amended version to the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Light. As it's amended, can we just read out the amended motion?
It's the recommendation number 2, award incentive 4, Harvey Bay Nodal Development in conjunction with incentive 6, development considered to be of special or significant benefit for the Stage 1 Marina Square development. And in the third recommendation, after the word for the, should say Stage 1 Marina Square development.
Are there any speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the very last item is item 16.2.1, proposed leases over the Maryborough Airport land. This is moved by Councillor Truscott, seconded by Councillor Maddern. Did you wish to speak to it? No? And that's the same as the recommendation, isn't it? We haven't changed that? No. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Before I close the meeting, I'll just check there was no further business. No. Officially close the meeting at 5 o'clock. Oh yeah. I want to thank the community of Glenwood and all the marvellous volunteers at the Glenwood Progress Association for being so welcoming and hospitable to us here today in your hall, which I think the council acknowledges is too small. We would like, we'll be back before it's built, but we would love our next meeting out here to be in the newer hall. But we want to work with you on that. And work with you next door with the men's shed. So thank you very much. You've been fantastic hosts. Thank you.